Even as a therapist, this has to be one of the most exhausting relationships that I have ever witnessed in my life. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Anya, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I'm going to be breaking down everything that we saw unfold between Jimmy and Chelsea on season 6 of Love is Blind. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? First, let me say there will be spoilers. I always have to say that. And please remember, disclaimer, I am none of these people's therapist. I've met absolutely not one person in person. All of my analysis is based on highly edited content that is manufacturing a certain narrative. So there's so much context that I'm missing out on and so much that's happened after the show that will never be included in the overall narrative, which is why a lot of times the reunions even feel unsatisfying for a lot of us. So please keep that in mind as I talk about them. Now, this is going to be a long one, so make sure you have a snack. I already did a video about the people who made the strongest first impressions on me, early warning signs, and Chelsea made that list. One of the first things that really stood out to me about Chelsea, I think the first note that I ever made about her, was her reaction to how Jimmy reacted to her sharing with him that she was married before.
We were married for almost 5 years, but it was just not my person.
That conversation to me went well because earlier Jimmy had been told by Jessica that she has a daughter, and that was news that was a bigger deal for him to process. So his response to Chelsea was like,
it doesn't scare me. To be honest, I heard bigger news today that scared me a little bit more.
And she took that as he was so uncomfortable with her being married before and told the girls in the lounge that it didn't go well.
What? Told him I was divorced, and it was like,
his reaction was super weird.
I don't even know.
And so that was one of the first moments where I started asking myself, did I miss something? Because when you're dealing with a person who is misinterpreting information and cognitive distortions are skewing the way that they are receiving what's being said to them or happening around them, it can make you question yourself. You're like, did I say the right thing? Like, did I miss something? You start asking yourself, what am I missing? Because she was so confident that the interaction hadn't gone well that I really thought that maybe I missed something. But as we see what ended up playing out with them and her pattern of engaging with not just Jimmy, but others as well, I was able to see, okay, we didn't miss anything. This is just how she interacts with people. When it comes to Jimmy, I really didn't have any strong first impressions. Like many people, he was involved in a love triangle. So most of his narrative in the pods was who was he going to choose between Jessica and Chelsea. And so I was getting stronger impressions from both Jessica and Chelsea than I was from him. But obviously, as we continue with the season, we see a lot more of his personality coming through. The one thing that stood out to me about Jimmy was that his response to Jessica when she did share with him that she had a daughter did not match the way he was talking about it after the fact. When she told him, he said,
that's not a deal breaker for me. I like you a lot, and I'd like to just hear more about it.
You know, he did challenge her to explain why she hadn't told him sooner in the process.
How come we didn't talk about that earlier?
But he didn't tell her that it was something that would bother him or really impact his decision, which naturally it would. It made me wonder if Jimmy was conflict avoidant, because even when he tells Chelsea later on,
to be honest, I heard bigger news today that scared me a little bit more.
I thought, well, Chelsea's hearing that, but Jessica didn't. He never really made it clear to Jessica that it was something that scared him. Now, she backed him into a corner, and I talk about that in my early warning signs video, that I think it was not a solid plan for her not to share with him that she had a child. But the way that he responded, he was more so trying to hold her accountable for not telling him sooner, but he did not let her know that this is something that could potentially be a deal breaker for him, which ultimately I think was one of the main reasons why he didn't move forward with her. Another thing that we saw is that Jessica opened up to him about her feelings. She had him read a letter that she wrote a couple of years before to her future husband, and he did not really match her energy. He didn't give her the satisfaction or the validation that she was wanting after opening up to him in that way.
I love it. That's
And she was upset with him about that. But I appreciated that he didn't just give her what she wanted to hear. But I did think that later on, when Jimmy tells Chelsea that he is in love with her.
It's been a long time since I've felt this way about someone, but I love you, Chelsea.
When he tells her that and Jessica hears it through the grapevine, I did think that was another instance where we see him being conflict avoidant. But he says that up until that point, he wasn't in love with Chelsea yet.
Told someone else that you loved them yesterday.
Because I got the clarity I needed after our date.
And that's why he didn't tell Jessica beforehand or break up with her before sharing that with Chelsea. We can never truly know any person's intentions, but especially on a show like this where we don't understand the editing of things, it's not until someone says it that we know for sure that that happened. In this situation, I felt like there was a possibility that Jimmy was going to wait to see how Chelsea felt about him, knowing that she had this connection with Trevor, before he would go through and end things with Jessica, which I don't think was fair. But we have to still acknowledge that Jessica also compromised the experiment by waiting so long to let him know that she had a child, because he really didn't have a lot of time to process that information as he was weighing the decision between the two of them. One question that Trevor asked Chelsea:
if I went first, would you have said yes to me?
Chelsea was very quiet, and because of that, it's led a lot of us to believe that she was similar to Jimmy, trying to really take advantage of which options are being presented to her. Maybe she didn't fully trust that Trevor would end up proposing, even though he didn't seem to be interested in anyone other than her. And so she told Jimmy yes when he proposed first. We don't know, but I will say, because of all of this stuff that was happening with both of them being involved in triangles, they started out on shaky ground, in my opinion. And I was always worried from the beginning that there would be some issue with ego, just knowing that your partner was so close to moving forward in this process with someone else. I have seen people say that they believe that Jimmy was gaslighting Jessica because he made it seem as though it wasn't a big deal to him about her daughter when it really was. The reason I don't see it as gaslighting is because I think in that moment, Jimmy was trying to avoid conflict. And we see this happening later on in the season with Chelsea. He seems to prioritize trying to figure out what way can he help calm a person down or prevent himself from hurting someone's feelings. And sometimes that can look similar to gaslighting, but gaslighting is more making a person feel crazy for what they are seeing or what they're believing, right? So later on, when Jessica is telling him, you sat there and let me have you read this letter, move forward in this process with you without letting me know that you were feeling stronger feelings for someone else, to me is not fair, because she waited so late to tell him about this huge factor that, of course, up until that point, he really was trying to still decide who would be the best fit for him. With her telling him so late, I believe he's trying to figure out, how do I feel about the connection we've made versus how do I feel about the fact that my life could be completely changed and I could become a father overnight to a preteen who I've never met.
I don't want to come in and be like, I'm ready to be a father figure, and she may not want that. Like that's weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's all about whether I feel like I can accept that piece.
That's a huge factor, right? Because when you're with someone and they have kids, especially if they're close to those kids, it's important that you know that you all can all get along. Now, the fact that he didn't tell her that in that moment, I can understand why he didn't. Maybe at that time he didn't even know, because she told him, I've been worried about telling you this. And he is basically telling her, you don't have to worry about telling me, but he really wasn't able to articulate to her how big of a deal that was without seeming like he was being mean. Now we have to talk about the Megan Fox moment.
Do you ever get told you look like a celebrity?
I do.
I do too. All the time on the plane, I get one person. It's MG. I don't even know if it's MGK's wife.
Megan Fox.
Here is my problem with that conversation. I think it would be totally different if Jimmy was the person who brought up the celebrity lookalikes. If Jimmy said, does anyone ever tell you that you look like a certain celebrity? And Chelsea responded, well, actually, yeah, people tell me I look like Megan Fox. That would be totally different. She's just answering a question that he asked. But for her to bring it up, even though she's saying,
And it's just because I have dark hair and blue eyes, but I don't see it, so don't get excited.
she is still the person bringing up the celebrity lookalikes, which I've already said I really don't like when people compromise the whole experiment of love being blind by bringing things up about looks in the pods. I think that really defeats the whole purpose or the whole premise of the show. But I think personally that even though she's saying she doesn't see it, I think she wanted Jimmy to know that this is what people say about her. Now, I know that she says she didn't agree, and it's just because she has dark hair and light eyes. But even saying that you have dark hair and light eyes is giving things away about your physical looks that compromises the experiment. I didn't understand why she would want to say that, and I absolutely understood why Jimmy felt like she lied to him about how she looked, because even though she said she didn't agree, she still felt the need to bring up this conversation and let him know what people say about her. And I also just felt like it was possibly manipulative, even how she was saying it in a roundabout way as though she wasn't even saying her name. She's like,
It's MG. I don't even know if it's MGK's wife or his girlfriend.
like, you know, nobody's coming up to you and say, hey, you look like MGK's wife or girlfriend. They're saying you like Megan Fox, so you remember his name and not hers. Like, I thought it was like a way of trying to sound modest and humble. I don't see it. That's how I took it, you know, and those are the kind of things that I do have to call out in therapy and say, my interpretation of why you brought that up or how you said that is this. Can you see why I would see it that way? And explain if there's any level of truth to my interpretation of why you said things. The thing about evaluating people is that you can't only pay attention to what they say. And so much of the argument has been, well, she said she doesn't believe it. It's how are you saying it? How is it coming into the conversation? And why? You know, she could have stopped herself at any point and said, well, you know what? We're not supposed to be talking about looks anyway, so never mind on that. But she decided to go forward with it. So I do think that she wanted it to be known that even though she doesn't see it, or so she claims, other people see that in her. So now Chelsea definitely held her cards close to her chest. When Trevor told her that he loves her, she didn't say it back.
Because I love you.
She just told him how she was feeling, but she didn't say it back. I didn't know if that meant that she had stronger feelings for Jimmy, or if she was just trying to not commit fully to anybody until she made a decision, and maybe to her saying I love you is a way of making that commitment before she was ready. But I did appreciate that she didn't just say something just because somebody else said it to her. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, when Jimmy told Chelsea that he loved her, she also didn't say it back. So I really think she wanted to make sure she knew how she was feeling before committing to either one of them verbally. With Jimmy and Jessica's relationship, I really did overall like how Jessica handled herself with everything except for that one thing with when she shared about her daughter. I thought that it seemed like first reactions to her being on the show in the first bunch of episodes, people were having like strong, I guess, suspicions of her, but I thought that she proved a lot of people wrong. I thought that she was articulate. I loved how she was able to name her feelings, and I love how she was able to accurately see that Jimmy was struggling most with her because she's more direct than anyone that he's dated in the past. And so I like the way that Jessica communicated. I really didn't have any problems with that. The main thing I didn't like is that she waited so long to tell him that she had a daughter, and I also didn't like that she accused him of cheating her out of the process, when in reality, it was her decision that very much affected their trajectory. So after Jimmy proposes, after they have their reveal, and Jimmy does accuse Chelsea of lying to him about her looks.
You're gorgeous.
Is it what you expected?
She definitely lied to me on some how she looked. Chelsea told me she looked like Megan Fox.
And we move into the Dominican Republic. That's where things start to really fall apart. And a lot of the things that I was concerned about in the beginning definitely were confirmed in a bigger way than I could even imagine. But the first thing was, After Jessica told Jimmy,
When you see and realize what you missed out on, you are going to choke.
this famous line that we're seeing all over TikTok, she really did plant this seed of doubt in the back of his mind about how she looked. And I thought that there were times where Jimmy's fears about her being right really were exposed.
And then she brought up looks as well, which was kind of
She brought up what?
looks.
What do you mean?
Like, she told me that I'll like be holding my breath when I see what she looks like, you know. I'm good. I'm phenomenal. Look at you. You look great. Not that looks matter.
Because he's worried about seeing Jessica. And this is where it starts to come out more, where Chelsea admits that she does not feel lovable.
I think it's so hard for me to feel loved and like lovable.
And that right there, that core belief, when we talk about core beliefs, a lot of times we're talking about schemas, like inherent views of the world. That belief that she is not lovable, we see follow her throughout the course of the season. It really counteracts how she portrays herself in certain situations. Like when she's talking to Jimmy's family, later on she says,
I think I'm settled in who I am as a person.
and it's like, these are things she knows that you should say, but realistically, you've already shown that these things are not true about you. And I believe the truest thing that Chelsea ever said is that she does not believe that she is lovable. Because when Jimmy tries to communicate that he loves her time after time, when he does certain things, it is feeding that narrative. It is giving validation to the narrative in her mind that she is not lovable. So as we talk through some of these different instances, it will always come back to that core belief that really distorts her way of interpreting things that are said and done. So one thing that we'll notice is that there is a pattern with their communication. Chelsea will ask Jimmy a question for validation.
Do you still feel like the same way that you did in the pods though?
And then Jimmy will give a,
Yeah.
and then Chelsea's pattern is to respond with, are you sure?
Are you sure?
Feeling like not a doubt in my mind.
Even with my couples, you have to pay attention to their pattern to see how can we disrupt it or how can we help them at least recognize it. She doesn't believe the positive things that Jimmy says to her, but she does believe anything negative. That she accepts without question. And she will meet that not with the, you don't really think that, but with immediate meltdown, breakdown, anger, upset. You're asking him these questions, and if he has anything negative to say at all, then you immediately start to be on the defense and to punish him for having any issues with you, even though you're allowed to have issues with him. So we see this first in the Dominican Republic. And I'll admit, when Chelsea first starts asking Jimmy these questions, I don't think he knows how to respond to them. He was not super reassuring in the very beginning, but as we start seeing the conversation towards the end, he starts to pick up on it like, oh, she needs me to say, I love you. What she really needs me to say is, I'm happy I chose you. Because her worst fear starts to become clear that she is also very worried about when Jimmy sees Jessica for the first time. She's not confident that when he sees her, their bond is going to be secure enough that he won't wish he made a different choice. But one thing we'll also see with Chelsea is that she often projects her own concerns onto Jimmy. So I started wondering if that's because she was worried that when she saw Trevor, she was going to feel more of a connection with him. Because she did say she likes a mullet and she likes really big buff guys. And Trevor seems like he is more her type. And she's really worried asking Jimmy, am I your type? Am I your usual type? Because she knows Jimmy is not her type. I believe that whatever worries or validation we were hearing Chelsea needing to pull out of Jimmy had a lot more to do with whatever validation she needed for herself to feel comfortable in her choice in picking him. And this is a teachable moment because it's something that I see with my clients all the time, whether they're talking to me as an individual that's in a relationship or if I'm talking to a couple, is that what you don't recognize is that your constant need for reassurance and validation is actually contributing to the very stress that would make your partner more inclined to leave the relationship. that is the thing that we don't understand. We're looking for the immediate gratification of someone telling us that they love us, that they want us. Of course, every person needs that at some point. But when they give it to you, try to believe them. And if you don't believe them, you might just not need to be with them. Because if you're relying on their words as the only way of feeling wanted by them, then maybe there are a lot of other things that are really countering that belief for you. Maybe they say, I love you and I want to be with you, but they're never spending any time with you. Or they aren't engaged with you when they are spending time with you. Or they're constantly picking fights with you. And really them saying, I love you, I want to be with you, does all of that make up for whatever you're lacking in the rest of your relationship? No, it doesn't. So to keep asking for that is not helping anything. Be observant. It's okay to say I love you and to say that you want to get compliments, to offer compliments and to want them in return. It's okay to educate your partner on the best way to compliment you. Those things are okay. But to constantly be testing your partner, to have them basically on trial every day to prove to you that they want to be with you, you are putting a strain on your own relationship. And if the relationship ends with that as a factor, most of the time people cannot see that. They do not recognize that the pressure they were putting on their partner to prove to them that they love them was a huge reason why they are no longer with that person today.
I was genuinely annoyed that you asked me like 5 times yesterday.
I get that. I hate that too.
And I'm the person who has to come in and explain that to them most of the time because I'm seeing the exact same pattern in their next relationship or in even platonic or familial relationships. If there's anything you take away from this video, that is one thing I want you to take away. If you are feeling insecure in your relationship, it's either something that you're feeling insecure about within yourself. I think in this case, Chelsea already admitted that she does not feel lovable. So that's a character trait. And also I think she had some discomfort around her looks because she talked about other women being gorgeous in a way that I never heard her refer to herself as. But the other reason you might be feeling that insecurity is because maybe your intuition is telling you your partner really does not want to be with you. And I know it's difficult to tell between intuition and cognitive distortions or just skewed thinking. And that's why if you're constantly finding yourself in that place, I highly recommend that you work with a therapist, really somebody who may be that focus on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, so they can help you parse out evidence from just your perspective or interpretation. So that is the main thing I want to focus on here with Chelsea, is that she was putting a lot of strain on her own relationship. And whenever Jimmy reacted to that strain, she became very frustrated. Chelsea is wanting to know if he's attracted to her.
Do you feel 100%?
I feel 100%. I don't have any worries with you.
Do you have a doubt in your mind?
He can't just say yes. It's like he's got to write a research paper to prove to her that he finds her attractive. When Jimmy says,
Since we've been here, just asked me a couple times like how I felt about my decision, and I'm just having to continue to reiterate.
He's saying, I'm constantly on trial with you. I don't know what to do or what to say to make you know that I am interested in being with you. Do I think Jimmy is innocent in all of this? I'm not saying that. And I know so many of you are going to watch this video and feel that that is what I'm saying. And I understand why you feel that way. But what I'm saying is that if Jimmy would have been with somebody else that was more stable, maybe his insecurities and his issues would have been more center stage. But the fact is, Chelsea was creating such a whirlwind of drama and conflict within their relationship that it is difficult to parse out a single thing Jimmy did where Chelsea did not do something far more extreme. And the thing about Chelsea is that she wants to admit that she did something wrong, but she never wants to take sole ownership of it. If he says,
I need you never to cross the line on the things you crossed the line on the other night. Ever. Like,
Same for you.
and I'll be sitting there thinking, in that particular situation, what did he do? Like, she doesn't want to take full ownership, even if she's pretending that she does. So the other thing we have to talk about in the Dominican Republic is when Jimmy says that AD is stacked.
that woman is absolutely stacked.
Context is important here, because when he first said that, I was like, now, Jimmy, you know Chelsea is not confident enough to hear you talking about another woman that openly, especially positively about their body. Now, somebody might say, why would you say Chelsea needs to be confident enough for him to say that? I say that because, believe it or not, there are a lot of relationships where a husband or wife can comment on another person's body and it actually is not a big deal.
I didn't take it offensive.
I said it in the most respectful way.
For a lot of people, it is not a huge deal because it doesn't feel like a direct threat to your partner's attraction to you. I don't think Chelsea was in a place, confidence-wise or security in the relationship-wise, to be able to hear him refer to another woman as being stacked. But the context here is important because after that said, it comes out that basically Chelsea is the one who told him that.
I said it, so he can say it.
And she takes it a step further and announces it to AD.
I saw what he said. He goes, that girl,
Whoa.
she's pretty stacked.
And gets upset later to say,
Or like when he made a comment about AD and her body, and I like felt so uncomfortable that I called it out.
how can you blame him for you exacerbating the discomfort in a situation? Thing to do in a situation like that is, if it made you uncomfortable, turn to him and say, now, how do you think that makes me feel? Or that's not what you want to hear from your partner when you're still trying to figure out how attracted they are to you. That was an option, but instead of turning to her partner, she turned outward and she dealt with it in a way that exacerbated the issue. Now Jimmy has to address it with AD. You just brought the conversation to her. He doesn't want to sound like someone who's just talking about her behind her back, about her body. So now he's got to go have a conversation with her. And Chelsea's like,
And then the whole time you spent talking to AD when I was by myself.
she could have also walked over with her and said, yeah, I was just telling him about, you're the one who opened it, right? So these are examples of misjudgments by Chelsea that actually increased her anxiety and insecurity within the relationship instead of serving as an opportunity for them to grow through it. Then they come back to the hotel. Chelsea has been telling the girls all night how she's so frustrated with Jimmy. Jimmy comes over there to come check in on her. She's, staying away from him, like not really engaging. And so he walks away. Then they get back to the hotel and Chelsea is like,
What's wrong?
Good. I'm good.
What's wrong?
Nothing's wrong.
again, this is the clearest example we can show of Chelsea projecting because something is wrong with her. We know that. He's like,
What?
Something's wrong.
No, I'm good. I promise.
I think you're lying to me. I think you're lying.
just to say something is wrong with her. So however she's feeling in the moment, like her vision is clouded by her emotions and she interprets it as Jimmy's feeling that way instead of being able to accept that she is feeling that way. Then we get to Charlotte. I think one of the more notable moments is when Chelsea's friends come over. Jimmy is back to working. He works from home. Chelsea tells her friends he hasn't kissed me all day.
He hasn't kissed me once today.
What?
Mm-hmm.
What?
She also talks to them about Jessica.
He saw a picture of the girl that he almost picked yesterday, and she's stunning.
And Jimmy comes down, meets her friends. He's affectionate with her. He goes back upstairs, and later on they have a conversation. She's like,
You didn't kiss me one time today.
he's like, what? He comes to give her a kiss. Then later on he tells her all these times that he did kiss her.
I did kiss you today, though.
This morning?
I kissed you when you were in the bathroom getting ready.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
And she still says, after that, after we actually have seen him kiss her, she still says,
You didn't kiss me once today.
I did.
You never tell me you love
Kissed
me.
you twice.
so what does this look like? This is also a cognitive distortion. We call it all or nothing thinking. So she is dissatisfied with the level of affection that she's received from Jimmy today. In her mind, she generalizes it. She exaggerates it. You haven't kissed me not one time. You haven't talked to me not one time. You never tell me you love me. So always, never. These things are absolutes. This is a person who is having difficulty seeing gray areas. If you can say to your partner, I know that we had our time to cuddle, cuddled today. When you met my friends, I appreciate that. I know you gave me a little peck on the cheek or we kissed or whatever, but I really would love to have more of that. That's fair. You're just making a request. But to say you never, you always, these are things that I'm constantly having to disrupt in session and ask about exceptions. Like, wow, he's literally never done that. And then we start going through all of the exceptions of times that he has. Do they want to focus on that? No, because what they want to say is, sure, but, yes, but that's what you really want to just focus on, the thing that's making you upset. But if we give ourselves opportunities to accept and appreciate the exceptions, we can articulate, hey, this thing you did, I love that. And I would love to see more of that. That way a person feels like they're not starting from zero. They're like, okay, so you've already seen things from me that you want and you just want more of that. Happy to do more of that. But when they feel like this whole time they're thinking that they're doing something and you're telling them, oh no, baby, you're at ground zero. You're in the negative. That's very demotivating. That makes a person not want to try harder to be what you're needing them to be. She asked Jimmy to tell her how he's really feeling, right? Because in her heart, she's believing all these negative things and she's not going to believe the truth until something negative comes out. But when he says anything negative,
I really do care about you, but truthfully, you've been a little clingy.
she melts down like,
Clingy?
I felt like
Kidding me?
she literally said to him in a conversation,
You started causing these problems and digging for the second you saw Jess's picture.
it's not about Jess at all.
she says that to him when it's obvious to me, and I'm imagining most of the audience, that's exactly what she did. She went and started digging for something to create a problem. What she says to him is, you started digging for Ish the moment you saw Jess's picture. When it's the opposite, right? She found out about that. We saw her talking about that with her friends, and now she's picking an argument and asking him to validate once again that he wants to be with her. I believe Chelsea was terrified about Jimmy finally meeting Jessica, because I believe Chelsea thought if he sees her, he's going to wish that he picked her. That's what she was afraid of. And it's a very valid fear, but just say that. All you have to say is, my worry is that when you meet her, you'll wish that you were with her and not me. Give him an opportunity to say, I'm glad you shared that with me. I don't think that's gonna happen because I made a decision based not on how anyone looked, but based on how we connected in the past. That's the whole point. Or he could say, I'm not gonna lie, that's a possibility. And then she could just deal with that, right? But until she is honest and tells him that's what you're worried about, we're having all of these passive aggressive, unproductive conversations because we're not really talking about the issue. We're talking around the issue. And he's telling her, I experienced you to be clingy. Now let's talk about, what does clingy mean? I typically will only see people who have an anxious attachment style being accused of being clingy. When you have an anxious attachment style, you are terrified of a person leaving you. You're worried about abandonment and rejection at a level that the average person may not be worried about. We all are worried about abandonment in some sense because we need community for survival. But a person with an anxious attachment style, typically, however they were raised, they could not be secure that their parent or whomever their primary caregiver was would be there waiting for them if they were to go off to explore. Or if their parents went off, they couldn't be sure that parent was going to come back and provide them with what they needed. That's usually what contributes to an anxious attachment style. I really don't know much about what Chelsea's upbringing was like with her family. We didn't really get very into that with the show, but the way that Chelsea conducts herself, sometimes you develop these attachment wounds way past your experience with your parents. Sometimes it happens with previous relationships. Now, Chelsea says that things are great with her and her ex-husband, but she does say that she's been cheated on a lot.
I've been cheated on a lot.
And she said that her partners have cheated on her with female friends. So she is already coming into the situation with nerves and anxiety based on her history. Understandably so. You're not expected to just let go of your history and give every person a clean slate. You need to be able to learn from previous experiences so you can weed people out sooner and not have to keep dealing with the same pain over and over again. That's totally fair. But if you are feeling that strongly that a person is not loving you or supporting you or is a threat to your overall happiness and confidence, you shouldn't be fighting for that relationship either. There were times where Jimmy tried to end it and Chelsea was like, wait, why?
I know that night was horrible, but like, for you to just throw in the towel if having a bad night is like,
So at that point, if you're so insecure within the relationship and you don't believe that he really loves you, why would you be fighting so hard to stay with him? It doesn't add up. Now we've got to talk about Chelsea meeting Jimmy's two female friends. They ask her directly, how do you feel about him having female friends? And she says,
I've dated people who have really good girlfriends and they've all cheated on me with the good girlfriends.
But you know, she basically just being honest with them. You know, it's a sore point, but she's trying to be trusting. So the question people will ask is, what do you think about the fact that Jimmy actually has slept with one of his friends and is still hanging out with her? I can't tell people what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for their personal lives, but if they were my clients, I would not be in support of that. You're already trying to build trust with this person that you just met, and to know that you're spending time with someone, like talking to them all day, spending all this time with them without me, and knowing that you guys have had a physical history, I think that that really makes it difficult for someone to trust you. I do understand Jimmy's perspective that this is something that just happened. It's not something that's happening now. And he brings up the point that Chelsea is actually, in fact, close friends with her exes.
But I also have close guy friends, so one of my best friends is my ex-boyfriend. We just were better off as friends than we were partners.
So this is also a person that you have presumably had sex with that you are still in contact with. So they both have a similar history with that, but I think the difference is that this is clearly somebody Jimmy spends a lot of time with.
Who do you text all day? Who do you text?
Oh my goodness. If you're fishing for me to tell you that I text my girlfriends all the time.
I see.
As someone that he had the nerve to introduce to Chelsea on camera. I think that was a very bad choice. And that was the first time I looked at Jimmy through a completely different lens. That is when he definitely lost me. It was so unfair to Chelsea to introduce her to these friends on screen and tell her about your physical history with them off screen.
I know you her and you told me that.
I told you off camera that, like,
I know, but then
I don't want to talk about that.
And then to go spend time with them. Now, he's saying he wasn't even hanging out with his friend that night. So I don't know what the information was that got back to Chelsea. But this is clearly something that's in the back of her mind. I think that it was totally valid for Chelsea to be uncomfortable with it. And I think it was totally valid for her to have worries and anxieties about the time he's spending with this person that he has had a physical history with, especially given her past experiences with people assuring her that these are just friends and then cheating on her with those said friends. And I think it was so unfair for Jimmy to put her in a position where she can't talk about this on screen as we're following their relationship. And this is a major factor that she is working through. I think that was completely unfair. And Jimmy being in a position of saying like, hey, I'm trying to protect my friend and you're putting her reputation on the line. No, sir, you put her reputation on the line because you introduced the world to her knowing that there was this skeleton in your closet that you were hiding. We never had to even meet her. This could have been a completely figurative situation. This could have been something that Chelsea just brings up and says, hey, you slept with one of your friends, and we never even know because we never met those friends. I think that was his fault for putting her in that position. And I think it was not fair to her that he didn't want her to bring it up. And the thing about Jimmy is he went hard for that friend.
But you said, I'm unwilling.
At this point, I'm unwilling.
Now, I think he also went hard for Chelsea. You know, he fought for her. He dealt with a lot to try to show her that he loves her. But he fought hard for that friend. And if I was Chelsea and I was already dealing with those insecurities, that would just make me more worried. Like, wow, you're really getting upset about this. Like, her image is so important to you that you're willing to call off our wedding. He kept referencing that as if that was one of the major factors.
I told you out of confidence about one of my friends that I had a prior relationship with. You threw that in my face.
But I hear what he was saying. He's saying, now I feel like I can't trust you. I feel like I can't tell you things without you like blowing up about it and exposing me and the people I care about. But I think he did that to himself. You put her in an impossible situation and she was trying to grapple with it alone without anybody knowing. But the problem with Chelsea, as I've said, is that Chelsea does not start with the thing that's really bothering her. And that is what ends up making her look unstable. If she started that conversation with Jimmy and said, after you shared with me the background you did about your friendship, I'm terrified when you go out and you might be with those friends. I'm worried about that. Now he might be like, I told you not to say this on camera, but that's on him then, right? The world's gonna look at him with the side eye, not her at all. But since she started out with saying,
I don't want to be with someone who wants to go out and party.
and he's like,
I was gone for an hour. I went and had one drink.
And he's like, I invited you. I don't want people messaging me, asking me why you're out and I'm not with you. When you also said you make the choice not to go out with them.
I did ask you. I was like, you can go with me. You were already bundled up. You did not have any desire to go with me, and I don't blame you.
Everybody's gonna look at you like, what is he supposed to do? He can't hang out with anybody? He's not allowed to go to a birthday party, be out for an hour, get home by 9 p.m.? Like, he's not allowed to do that? You're like, well, I just don't know if I want to be with somebody like that. Like, okay, well, yeah, you shouldn't be then. If somebody's not allowed to have friends, but then when you get to the real core of the issue, where it's like, hey, you have a physical history with your friends, so it makes me nervous when you're out with them and I'm not there, that's fair. But if that's the case, go out too. If your way of managing that situation is he just doesn't go out, that's not a solution. That is not a solution. Either you can't be with him, go ahead and end it, or you go out with him to feel more secure and confident that everything is on the up and up, or you figure out a way to just let it go and not punish him for a decision that you approved of at the time the decision was made, because he can't take it back now that he's home. So Chelsea's biggest issue is being honest with herself and with whom she's speaking with about what her actual concern is. And we can all get to this place, right? We feel like this problem I'm having is so trivial, or this makes me look petty, or this makes me look jealous. Let that all go. We all have those feelings. We all get jealous at times. That's a normal human emotion. You can start with that. It's totally acceptable for you to start with, I'm feeling jealous about XYZ, and that's why I'm in a weird mood. Give your partner a chance to support you through that, instead of making up other issues to hide the real problem that you're having. In this same episode, Jimmy tries to break up with Chelsea, and I have to say, at that point, I was so relieved that this relationship was ending. I was terrified that Jimmy was going to move forward with marrying Chelsea out of literally just trying to prove to her that he loved her. So I was relieved. But by the end of that conversation, the breakup didn't happen, and it just once again proved to me that Jimmy avoids conflict. He made up his mind, let me end this relationship, and by the end, they were saying, I love you, and I want to be with you, and I want to make this work. Sometimes we got to know when to hang it up, y'all, because we keep moving it further and further along, trying to fix situations. But when you have that same pattern happening over and over and over again, and we're not seeing a disruption to that pattern, or we're not seeing recognition of that pattern, you're signing up for a lifetime of the same. Now let's talk about this cookout. This is something they've been doing on these last few seasons, is getting everybody together, whether they're engaged or not, just for drama. And Jimmy and Chelsea actually weren't involved in a lot of the drama. I was super expecting that to be the case. I was pre-exhausted before this even happened. I was like, oh my gosh, once Jessica walks in, it's gonna be a whole nother conversation about how he really wanted to be with Jessica. When Chelsea sees Trevor and she's doing her confessional, she says that
Trevor is normally what I go for. Beefy, muscular. It's interesting to see him and like put a face to the voice, but it's complicated. Yeah.
I remember thinking, if Jimmy were to say that about Jessica and you saw that, you would not be cool with that. That's what I was thinking. But luckily, the whole thing played out and I was wrong. Jimmy was able to talk with Jessica. They had a long conversation. Chelsea was, of course, understandably uncomfortable, but she didn't seem to give him a hard time about it. Then Chelsea talks with Trevor. Jimmy comes over. He and Trevor have a little moment and the conversation goes well. But I think that was the difference, is that it was equal. I think Chelsea just didn't like the feeling of Jimmy's not attracted to her, and without accepting the possibility that, hey, maybe Jimmy's also not your type, but you're so worried about whether or not you're his type. You can be with somebody that's not your type and still want to be with them. That's okay. Type just means I typically go for a certain look. But I believe that because Chelsea also had her almost person there, it made things a little bit more even, where she couldn't judge Jimmy too harshly. And I also think it was kind of like exposure therapy, because I think Chelsea was so terrified about the moment that Jimmy finally saw Jessica and decided that that's who he wanted to be with, that once it finally happened and he was still with her, he was still kissing her, he was still going to grab drinks for her, I think she's like, okay, I've lived through my worst fear of him meeting her and he's still choosing me. And I think that's where we started seeing a decline in a lot of the more erratic behaviors that we saw with her, because her worst fear happened and it wasn't nearly as bad as she thought. I will say, while we're talking about Trevor, things have come out about Trevor after the show. And I will say one thing that made me question his character is when he was having the conversation with Chelsea at that barbecue. And he said,
I think I asked this question in there, but I'm gonna ask it again.
Okay.
If orders were switched and I went first,
Yeah.
would there be a different outcome?
and she said no. And then he goes,
Just because Jimmy and I had a
You have to say
conversation.
that to be a good person.
so why did you ask her? If you felt like she only had one option of what to say, then you're putting her between a rock and a hard place, right? Because if she says, yes, I would have chosen you, now she's the bad person. And if she says no, now she's just trying not to be a bad person. He already made it up in his mind that was the truth, and he just wanted her to validate the truth that he already came up with in his mind. It showed ego, and I thought that very much countered the softy he portrayed himself to be in the pods, that he would try to back her into a corner like that. Obviously, you know, it hurts to be rejected. For the most part, was being cordial and nice, but I thought that was a moment that made me say, is his mask slipping a little bit? Now, during that conversation at the barbecue, both Jimmy and Chelsea said things that could be an issue if you want to make it an issue. Jimmy told Jessica,
In reality, you were my number one still.
and Chelsea said to Trevor,
Like, I did love you, and I do love you. I think you're amazing.
so both of them said things that if the other one heard it or saw it, they would be concerned. So I thought it was pretty equal. Then, of course, we get to where they're getting ready for the wedding and all this stuff. And then Jimmy finally tells Chelsea,
I don't want to go to the altar.
and I don't like how he did it. You know, he tells her that he doesn't want to go to the altar, but the way that he did it is by basically asking her, like, how are you feeling? Maybe part of him was hoping that she would say she didn't want to, and he could just say, yeah, same, or I agree. The way that she answered, too, was so hesitant.
I feel like some days it's hard for both of us. Today, I feel really, really, really good.
Well, today was a good day. Today, yes, I want to go to the altar. Like, that is just not enough. I feel her when she says,
Why did you treat me like you did today? We had the best day today. Why didn't you tell me then? Why did you waste my time coming here?
and I think he's like, I really don't know when to say it. Because every time he brought up any grievance to Chelsea, she completely melted down and exploded on him. And he didn't know how to respond. I agree with him completely that they should not move forward to going to the altar. They should have broken up earlier. I also appreciated that he decided to end it before they made it to the altar. I know that some of the original cast is coming out saying, you know, back when we were doing our seasons, you had to go to the altar. I like that that's not required now, because I think to have someone's friends and family come and witness a public humiliation is really unfair to them. And so I'm happy that we're seeing more people ending things before the weddings. We're at risk of having more seasons like season 5, which was very boring because we only had 2 couples even really being engaged through the process. But we are at least not seeing people phoning it in for as long as possible just to get the shock factor at the altar. Obviously, it's a TV show, so the world's going to see it. But to actually have somebody's parents coming to take away the experience for someone's dad walking them down the aisle for the first time, just to know the whole time you're going to say no. Like, to me, that sort of thing is cruel, especially if you have developed any level of care for this person, even if you're not in love with them, even if you don't think that you can have a successful marriage with them. If you have any level of care, to have them go through all of those stages and to have their family involved just to know you're going to say no, I think that's cruel. If you're just still not sure up until you get to the altar, that's one thing. But if you're in Jimmy's situation and you know that you wouldn't feel comfortable saying yes, I completely respect him not going all the way through to the altar. He tried to end it earlier, and Chelsea really didn't want him to, and he ended up agreeing for them to stay together, but he did try to end it earlier. So I can't fault him for the fact that it was so close, but I do respect the fact that it was done at least before they made it to the actual wedding. So those are all of my thoughts on Jimmy and Chelsea. A really long video, but I appreciate you guys that are still here watching with me. If you're in the instant premiere with with me. You're the real MVP. Thank you for not leaving me hanging in here by myself. I love chatting with you guys throughout these videos. It keeps me motivated to get them out as soon as I can so I can talk with you guys. I thank you for watching this video. Please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with any Love is Blind fans, reality TV fans, therapist review fans, anybody that you think could enjoy this content or even better can learn something from it. That is always my aim with these videos. Thank you for watching this video all the way until the end. You definitely didn't have to, but the fact that you did helps me out so much. So thank you, thank you, thank you.